Alright guys, we have some big news coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. After Donald Trump's announcement, it appears that Iran's media is reporting that a US ship has been confronted in the strait. Now, no one seems to be injured at this point in time. Let's get into all of this. You guys will have to bear with me. You know I'm traveling this week. That's why my background looks a little different. And I'm in DC of all places. Get it? I'm in the belly of the beast here. But let's get into this story, ladies and gentlemen. So Donald Trump made this announcement. Let's go ahead and bring this in here. Trump says that the US will guide stranded ships from the Strait of Hormuz starting on Monday. And that is today. Again, bear with me because I'm working with limited resources here. One screen this time. Okay, so this is what Donald Trump said. Trump gave a few details about what could be a sweeping attempt to help hundreds of vessels and some 20,000 seafarers. Iran quickly denounced the move as a ceasefire violation. The US announced that they are going to launch an effort on Monday, which is today, to guide stranded ships from the Strait of Hormuz. President Donald Trump said this as 2 ships are on the strait reported being engaged. Obviously, as you guys know, Iran is not going to agree to this. So Donald Trump keeps finding ways to escalate the situation and make things more tense than they already are. To make a long story short, Iran had announced that they rejected what Donald Trump wanted to do. The plan was to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which the US does not control, but is now attempting to influence. And Iran basically said, if you do that, there will be a response. So the US was warned. Let's get into this a little more. Again, like I said, crazy times, ladies and gents. It goes on to say they are calling this Project Freedom, of all things. Trump said in a social media post on Sunday that neutral and innocent countries have been affected by the Iran situation. He said, we have told those countries that we will guide their ships safely out of these restricted waterways so that they can freely and ably get on with their business. Project Freedom would begin on Monday. Trump also added that his representatives are having discussions with Iran that could lead to something very positive for all involved. U.S. Central Command said the initiative would involve guided missile destroyers, more than 100 aircraft, and 15,000 service members. The Pentagon did not immediately answer questions about how they would be deployed, and I'll get into the CENTCOM post here in just a second. But first and foremost, we are now talking about sending more troops to the Middle East. That is exactly what we need to be moving away from. Donald Trump is choosing to put American service members in a difficult position by sending more of them to the region. We're talking about 15,000 people. He is not de-escalating. He is escalating. Here's a statement from CENTCOM itself. U.S. military supports launch of Project Freedom in the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM says CENTCOM forces will begin supporting Project Freedom on May 4th to restore freedom of navigation for commercial shipping through the strait. The mission directed by President Trump will support merchant vessels seeking to freely transit through this essential international trade corridor. A quarter of the world's oil trade at sea and significant volumes of fuel and fertilizer products are transported through the strait. Our support for this defensive mission is essential to regional security and the global economy. That statement is coming from Brad Cooper, the CENTCOM commander. Let me just jump in here for just a second. I want to remind everyone that this situation developed because of the decisions made by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu to take action against Iran. You cannot take those kinds of actions against a country affecting their infrastructure, affecting their people, and then expect them to just say, okay, that happened, but we're going to keep the strait open so you can still get the oil you need. You cannot expect that. So it's very difficult to understand how Donald Trump's response to this is to say, we are going to escort those ships through the strait no matter what. You are making things significantly more complicated and escalating the situation further. And it is genuinely difficult for me to understand how CENTCOM is simply saying, yes, we stand behind this decision. I just spoke with Scott Ritter yesterday. Hopefully you caught that conversation. We are already seeing diesel prices in Michigan hitting $6 a gallon. All of this stems from the decisions made by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. This is not because of Iran. They are willing to allow the American people to feel this economic pain so that they can pursue this broader regional strategy and attempt to reshape the Middle East. This is absolutely something we need to talk about. Let's go back to the CENTCOM statement. It goes on to say, last week, the U.S. Department of State announced a new initiative in partnership with the Department of Defense to enhance coordination and information sharing among international partners in support of maritime security in the Strait. The maritime freedom construct aims to combine diplomatic action with military coordination, which will be critical during Project Freedom. Imagine calling this freedom. U.S. military support for Project Freedom will include guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, multi-domain unmanned platforms, and 15,000 service members. I mentioned land twice because I want you to pay close attention to that. Over 100 land-based assets. That suggests, ladies and gentlemen, that there's a ground component being considered here. They're not using the phrase ground presence, but let's use some common sense. We have to use common sense. This is an escalation, plain and simple. Now, they did discuss this on the BBC and on Morning Joe because something else has happened since that announcement was made. According to Iran's media, they're reporting that 2 projectiles struck a U.S. ship in the Strait after it proceeded past a warning from the Iranian Navy. Let's bring that in here. I'm telling you guys, this situation is developing rapidly. State media is reporting that a U.S. vessel turned back from the Hormuz area and that according to Iran's Navy, it prevented the entry of U.S. warships into the Hormuz zone. State television added that 2 projectiles struck a U.S. warship near Qeshm Island after it proceeded past Iranian warnings. This is being reported by the Fars news agency, that is state media in Iran. I cannot independently verify that for you at this moment, but this is what we are hearing from the Iranian side. We have not yet received any response from the Americans or from the White House. Notice, by the way, when information is coming from Iranian state media, they cannot verify it. But they verify US and Western media all the time, even when it later turns out to be incorrect. That is worth paying attention to. So the key word here that I want people to focus on is ignored warnings. It is not as if Iranian responded without any prior communication. They issued warnings and the vessel reportedly proceeded anyway. So far, no injuries have been reported, but this could have gone in a very different direction very quickly. And that is the point I want people to understand. This is a serious situation. Scott Ritter was right. He described this as an incredibly reckless approach. Donald Trump said the United States would undertake an operation to ease the passage of commercial vessels through the strait. If you look at the map, the Strait of Hormuz is that narrow curve between Oman and the Iranian coastline. On either side of those dots are vessels at anchor. Donald Trump is saying 15,000 U.S. service members will be utilized to enable the passage of these vessels. He claims it is for humanitarian purposes, although analysts and experts suggest there may be a different rationale behind it. This is a serious development. Iran is not bluffing here. Now, let's get to what was said on Morning Joe, because they are something else. Let me bring this up here. So on Morning Joe, David, speaking of reporting, Barak Ravid of Axios is saying that a senior U.S. official denied that a U.S. ship was struck by Iranian projectiles. We are in the early moments of this, so I certainly am not placing any moral equivalency between the government of Iran and the U.S. government. I will simply say we have 2 eyewitnesses saying that the ships were in fact struck, according to Al Jazeera, and we have 1 senior official right now in background telling Axios that no U.S. ship was struck. So it is hard to say, and we will need to wait at least a few hours before we get actionable information. This is quite something, right? Because the way they are trying to frame this is, oh, well, they responded to a U.S. Navy ship. The president is going to have to take action. But here's the thing. Iran had every right to respond when the U.S. decided to take action against its infrastructure and its people. They would never say that, though. So watch the way these things are framed. Pay close attention to the framing. That is what I want to leave with you guys on that point. Now, it is not just the ship situation. There's also this issue involving the UAE. The UAE is accusing Iran of targeting an empty Abu Dhabi oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz using drones. Now again, what did Iran say? They told people not to come through. NOK's Maritime Logistics Unit said the vessel, the Baraka, was empty when it was approached by 2 drones and no injuries were reported. This is the UAE accusing Iran of engaging their tanker. But according to Western media, oh, none of this has been confirmed. Let's go on. The UAE stressed the need for Iran to stop these actions, ensure a full commitment to an immediate de-escalation of all activity, and the complete and unconditional reopening of the strait. The foreign ministry added that Iran has been managing entry and exit from the Gulf for most non-Iranian ships since the US and Israel began taking action against it on February 28th. So this is the UAE saying that Iran engaged their tanker right after Iran had told them not to come through. Let's go back to the Morning Joe analyst. We have some Gulf allies, in particular the United Arab Emirates, who have been saying you cannot leave us stranded in this situation. As Joe said earlier, They've been saying you have to finish this and kind of egging Trump on. There are others calling for restraint, and I think Pakistan is trying very hard to find a middle path. Here is the issue. The UAE had options. Instead of pushing back on the US government, the UAE basically aligned itself completely with the US position. They could have easily said to the US government, we do not want your bases in our country. You are creating complications. We are going to handle our own affairs and work things out through diplomacy. They could have said that. All of those Gulf allies could have taken that position. Instead, they chose a different path. And now they're asking for US help to get out of the difficulty they find themselves in. The United States has a responsibility to the American people first. All of this, these are described as our allies, and we supposedly have to help them at all costs. Meanwhile, we are not even adequately supporting people right here at home. You know what I mean? This is a significant problem, but that is the position the UAE decided to take. And now they are saying, please come help us get out of this. Now, when it comes to the media, I do want to show you that there are independent journalists in Iran, and one of them is Wyatt Reed from the Gray Zone. I want you to hear what he said. Wyatt Reed has been documenting his time there and sharing updates on X and other platforms. Here's what he said about how all of this came to be. Obviously, Donald Trump is responsible for this closure. I think there's no other way to view this. The Strait of Hormuz was open before the actions taken on February 28th, before the removal of Iran's leadership. It is now closed. There is a direct cause and effect relationship there. So I think it is very clear why there is a standstill in this critical shipping corridor. Iran has declared that once the current situation is resolved, it will determine the appropriate protocols for this vital strategic waterway. And Wyatt Reed is correct. That is how we got here. This is all because Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu chose to pursue this course of action against Iran. And Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly told Donald Trump, this will be easy. You'll go in and out, which turned out to be completely inaccurate. And that is how we got to this point. And now it looks like they're going to send even more personnel to the region. Guys, this situation is developing in ways that demand our full attention. Keep your eyes on this one. Hey guys, this was a savvy clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.